off. Hello, my name is Brad Bodnerchuk, and welcome to the Half a Dozen Hospitality Podcast, where we discuss everything hospitality, from the food on the plate to the teams that make it happen and the community that drives this industry forward. On this podcast, we sit down and chat with some of the most exciting, inspiring, and innovative minds that make up one of the most dynamic industries that there is today. And today, I have the pleasure of being joined by none other than Carla Obando. Welcome to the show, and good morning.
Thank you. Good morning.
Thank you so much for being here. If you are on iTunes or Stitcher or Podbean or any of the audio platforms for a podcast, I encourage you guys to go check out YouTube as well. We are in what I'm calling, I guess, our new recording studio. It's the back office of our co-working space that we now occupy. It's nice because it's kind of quiet. There's not a lot of sound around here, so it works out well for that. I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your day to come and share your story with myself and the listeners. I'm excited to learn more. So Carla and I have been talking in the background for months now. We had a phone conversation months ago, and I think it was just like scheduling conflictions that just didn't allow for us to get together, but we're finally here now. So again, thank you so much for your patience in us getting together. And I want to say, I'll give the listeners a peek under the tent. You had said before we turned the mics on that you were a bit nervous,
yes.
which is totally normal, which surprised me though, because you seemed, how do I say this? Like you seemed really into doing the podcast. Like you seem like, I want to do this podcast. Let's do it. So I'm happy you're here. And like I said, it's my job to make you feel super comfortable, and I'm sure it'll be a really fun time. So Carla Obando, you are the owner and operator of Born Bright Foods, which for me was really intriguing as a father of a young child. I'm always very cognizant of the food that my daughter Lena is eating and what goes into it and who makes it and what that process is. And I only know the surface of what Born Bright is and why it exists, but help myself and the listeners understand more of kind of your story, how Born Bright became to be, and why you feel it exists.
Yeah, so Born Bright Foods is kind of a blend of my passion for food. I've had a background in the food industry as well, and my passion for health and putting importance in nutrition and what we put in our body. And my background in nutrition, working at the hospital, seeing little kids or babies growing, and nutrition is ultimately the pinnacle of the start of their building blocks as they grow and their bodies grow. And so after that, I just started getting more interested in what can I create in terms of linking both my experience with nutrition and the food, my passion for food. And I wanted to challenge the idea that baby food doesn't have to be bland. And I think coming from different cultures, Vancouver's multicultural food scene, we can gain from that baby food doesn't have to be bland like carrots and peas, right? And so I started creating recipes from my own kitchen and having my young nephew try it, who was around 6 months at that time.
Okay.
And you'd be surprised how he loved all the cumin, the spices, and the herbs, and even grown-ups love the flavors as well. And that's ultimately how I got started with Born Bright Foods. I wanted to create something that is not just nutritious, but is really flavorful and is tasty, that parents and babies would love as well.
And let's just quickly unpack the hospital thing for a minute. So you worked at the hospital, or you currently work at the hospital?
I currently work at the hospital as well as a dietitian at the NICU, actually. So I work with really tiny babies the size of avocados or your Starbucks cup latte, right?
Wow. So precious.
Yeah,
Actually,
exactly.
I was having a conversation with someone randomly on Granville Island. Sorry guys, pardon me for a little bit of this sidebar story here, but this gentleman, he had his first grandchild. They're in Australia, the baby, the mother, and his son. But the baby was 13 weeks early, so obviously in NICU. And it's just amazing the science that exists now in medicine that is as not ideal as it is for baby to come out that quickly. They're able to thrive still. And I would assume not only just the medicine, but then products and items like Born Bright Foods at some point would really help that kid kind of get back on track with where they should be.
Yeah.
Nice little segue and plug for you there.
Yeah, it's great being in the NICU because you get to observe what like nutrition really, like it does help along with the medical team as well to really make sure that that baby's growing and independent, like off of medical device after, and be able to go home.
Right. So let's talk about the kids that maybe aren't in such dire straits in the NICU. Like there are other babies that are coming in and out of the hospital, and I guess just the general population as well. Like you and I, if we're unfortunately in the hospital for whatever it is, the food that is available, and this is not unique to us here in Vancouver or in BC as a whole. This is, I think, from my exposure to any hospital, is like the food seems to be pretty uninspired and pretty lacking. What is your opinion on why that is the case? Is it a financial thing? Is it an economics thing? Is it a time? What is it that lacks in seemingly the environment where you would want to have the most nutritious and well thought out meal, especially someone as a dietitian? Yeah. What is that? Why does it exist, and how much of a struggle is that for you and what you're trying to do day in and day out? I
think that's an excellent question, because coming from a patient's perspective, and also now that I am running a business as well, I get to kind of see both, where as patients we want something delicious or something tasty and appealing, which in a hospital setting, in a business setting, which yes, hospital is a business, right?
Yeah.
It's definitely a challenge because they have to look at food safety, where certain foods need to be heated at certain temperatures, just to make sure that what patients that are immunocompromised are getting the best or the most
the safest
safe. Exactly. And so they have to balance that in addition to budget. And so in our healthcare system, unfortunately, we're definitely kind of pushed to a bit of a thinness in terms of being able to provide like funding for certain areas in healthcare. So they have to contract this with like large companies like Sodexo or Morrison. And so I think it's definitely a big business, but they are striving hard to incorporate sustainability and also local like produce as well. I know Sodexo I'm not like sponsored by Sodexo or anything, but they do have programs and they're trying to bring in more and more of this.
Right.
And I think it's also part of their mandate as a large company as well.
Yeah, I think we're seeing things with food, like you look at what Walmart's done in the past like 10 years and how they've pivoted their model a bit, and they now have organic availability with some of their produce. So it's basically whatever we as the society starts to demand, they start to pivot. It's just shocking to me that, again, like I said, in an environment where you would think that the most important thing above anything else would be when you do eat what you are eating in a hospital environment. But I hear what you're saying. There are many other variables, not even just the economics of it, other variables that you have to consider, things like food safety.
Exactly.
So you can't just go whip up a soup and serve it to someone. There has to be. We can't
serve up like a cebayon or something like that, right? With raw eggs. Just because we're just a lot more strict in terms of food safety.
Right.
But in terms of appeal and like the flavors, there's definitely room for that. If we were to compare it to like Japan, if you were to compare the hospital food in Japan versus our hospital food, there's definitely a big difference.
Oh, yeah?
There's a lot more effort put into Japanese cuisine, and that also shows in like their hospispittal setting as well.
So yeah,
it's interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. Do you think in our time, I don't know how old you are, I shouldn't ask, but I'm 37, so I'm giving myself another 50 years ideally on this planet. Do you think in the next 50 years we'll see some change here in Canada with things like the food system inside of hospitals?
I think so. I think like more and more like patients and people just in general are requesting for it. And I think hospitals are wanting to do that as well. And that's why they put in certain mandates for these contract companies like Sodexo and Morrison to put in like less food waste or certain percentage of food waste for hospitals and incorporating like sustainability and local products in their food, which is great for the economy.
Yeah.
As well.
So there is change coming. Or if it isn't already, it's already happening.
It's in the works, but I think, it's definitely like a 5-year, 10-year plan that they have working.
I feel like I'd be remiss not to take advantage of the fact that you're a dietitian. So you come here with a background in education. You're the first you're the first time, pardon me, that I've had someone on the show with that designation.
Yeah.
And because what I discuss in the show so often is the fun side or the challenging side of our food systems and of restaurants and hotels and cafes and bars. But it's really cool for me, selfishly, to kind of understand the science behind why we should be shopping a certain way or eating food a certain way. And I think what you potentially could offer is more insights and understanding. And something I'm diving in a little bit deeper into, and hopefully you're into sharing your thoughts on this, is sustainability, not so much for our industry when it comes to like food and beverage, but the people that populate it, meaning the staff that make up a restaurant or the staff that make up a hospital, from the nurses to the doctors to the people cooking the food. There needs to be, I think, some more attention paid to the food that they're consuming as well, to make sure that they're able to perform their job. So I'm going to put you on the spot here if you're open to it. Restaurants are very demanding. And I had someone on the show a few weeks ago, I guess a month ago now, talking about how it's so demanding that you don't even know when you're going to be able to have food. Like during an 8-hour shift, there isn't like a designated break necessarily, because you don't know what's going to happen. So he was talking about how he basically would just eat a granola bar as fast as he could when he was going downstairs to change a keg, and that was his meal. So from your point of view, if you were to lend a voice from your background to the industry, and let's just talk about like servers, bartenders, people that are working, say, 6 to 8 hours straight on their feet, from a scientific standpoint, what should they be consuming either before they work, or if they have an opportunity during their work or post work? What would be like the most important thing for them to consider so that they don't feel so burnt out and they don't feel so tired? Like, what would be your recommendation for people like that?
I think just really taking the break, whether that's like 5 minutes or 10 minutes, or just having something on the side to like chow down, right? It almost sounds like you're talking about shift work.
Yeah, like
where
shift,
you're doing
exactly.
Like 8 to 12 to 14 hours. I actually will be doing like a talk to a bunch of firefighters as well regarding shift work, which is really awesome too. But
very cool.
it's a challenge, because by the time you hit like 6-8 hours, and if you're a really big guy that you're like one of the first responders, right? You will get hungry, and it's important to nourish yourself, because that's when the fuzziness start to happen. Can't concentrate. You get really moody and get really frustrated over little things. I think having a snack is really important, whether that be protein, carbs, or some form of like peanut butter or something. Just really have something to just have as a snack.
Is there,
if you're really
if you're really needing it?
Yeah.
Is there, and I don't mean to be sarcastic, this is sincere, because I know when I was in more aggressively into exercising and working out and competing, I would often use like applesauce in between workouts as like a quick little like sugar boost and to give me some energy and some carb. Would Born Bright be something that you potentially could see living at, say, a restaurant in a fridge for the staff to access? Because like you said, like it's not just like parents like it as well, adults like it as well. So is there an opportunity perhaps for there to be like a Born Bright fridge in every hotel and restaurant in the city?
The ideal the ideal like dream for me would be to have Born Bright Foods accessible for parents in a refrigerator or freezer section in every store.
Oh, very cool.
So that families have access to this convenient option. But you're kind of right, because Born Bright Foods is like, we have carbohydrates, protein, and fat in there. I made sure that it's just the right balance for growing babies or kids, right? And so, yes, people can definitely have it as a grab and go.
Yeah, perfect. How did you come to? I'm always intrigued by like branding and names. How did the name come to be, or did it just kind of come to you at like on a whim, or did you sit down and like pen to paper for hours?
Yeah, I had to sit down, pen and paper, but originally the name was actually called Little Scoops.
Okay, I like that.
So I wanted to have the logo of a spoon, and that's like it's like a nice container. But when I started having it in smaller stores in the frozen section, people started getting confused with ice cream.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And the name wasn't very helpful either.
Yeah.
And so we kind of got lost in the freezer section as well. So then I had to do a rebrand and called it Born Bright Foods. And with that logo, just it was more appealing. People remembered it. It just stayed with people more.
And so what is your ultimate vision? You mentioned being available in refrigerators and freezers.
Yeah.
Are we talking globally? Are we talking citywide, nationwide?
I think I'm starting within BC, but ultimately I want it to be a Canadian brand, like a known Canadian brand that really understands parents and, you know, the journey of parenthood, because it's tough at the very start.
Yeah,
I'm not a parent myself, but I've definitely like worked with the families and parents and know friends that are parents. And the first year, parents don't get enough sleep, right? And so the last thing that I had in my mind was, you know, food is, and introducing solid foods is a big topic for people to kind of go over. And at least with Born Bright Foods, by purchasing this product, they know that their baby's getting the nutrition that their baby needs, and they don't have to worry about the rest of the other, like cooking, prepping, and all those other things.
What is your take on something like baby-led weaning? And I only bring it up because we experienced that with our firstborn, and we have another baby coming in January.
Oh,
so we'll probably thank you so much. So my wife Lindsay was pretty quick to just go down that path of introducing things like avocado and banana and things that are easy for our daughter Lena to kind of play with and explore. So is that counterintuitive to what you want Born Bright food to be? Obviously, it's not a solid food.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on things
like that? Not at all.
That?
I think when introducing solid foods, I always tell parents that you can serve however you want to serve the food.
Right.
Whether you're comfortable with puree, you're comfortable with mixed texture, or you're wanting to start baby-led weaning. And with baby-led weaning, it's actually also a great way to get their motor and oral skills started. But it is definitely a struggle, and it could get messy in the very beginning.
Very messy. There's
things don't go into the mouth as much, you know, things are on the floor, but that's fine. It's more so for them to get that practice and also learn about food. And you don't always have to have it right from the start, like get it right.
Exactly. Everyone's learning at that point.
Exactly. But I find that majority of the parents or families that I speak to, it's either we're baby-led weaning or we're puree. But it doesn't have to be like two different topics. It can be together.
Yeah, exactly.
Kids can learn both puree and baby-led weaning items.
What is the major difference that you can kind of highlight for me and for the listeners? I think we see pouches all over the place now when it comes to kids and those purees, like puree in that form. Whereas I think when I was a young kid or even a baby, it was those like glass Heinz containers of pureed peas that just stunk and didn't smell good or probably taste that great. So we've transitioned. I'm sure they still exist, but we've transitioned now to seeing pouches a little bit more readily available and more popular. I know there's also some environmental issues with that in regards to recycling those. Yeah. So let's talk about the packaging that you've chosen, but also what's inside of it, how that differentiates from what you would get in, say, your traditional organic pouch that you could buy at a Whole Foods or a Save-On.
Yeah, so when I first started, I was gravitating towards the pouch just because it's a lot easier to fill and a lot easier to work with. But I wanted to create a product where parents can have a better interaction with their babies. So what actually happens with pouches is that they lose that connection with the food just because they're not really interacting with it. They don't know what's inside. They can't really smell it. They can't taste it or touch it.
Can't see it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's the small little things that you find that when they're growing up that they are these little things like help them learn. Right. So they're kind of missing that piece. And so in like a learning perspective, they're not really getting that. And then the other thing too, is that they don't really get to practice their, like how to properly chew just because food just goes straight into the mouth. But it's a very convenient option for parents to have. And like companies that have the pouches, they actually have put in like fruits and vegetables. The only concern would be the percentage of fruits compared to the ratio of vegetables that they're marketing it for.
Oh, okay.
Exactly.
Right.
They're roughly, I think, around like 12 to 14 grams of sugar, whereas Born Bright Foods in a small container that's the same size as a pouch, it's a third less, or sorry, like it's a third of the sugar that you would find in the pouch.
Wow.
And that's almost like, I think 3 to 4 teaspoons that you would get in a pouch of,
Wow.
compared to like 1 teaspoon. And these are natural sugars in Born Bright Foods. So I just wanted to create something that is not highlighting sugar or the sweetness of it. I want kids to love like vegetables as is, like, you know, not with like high amounts of like pear or apple in there.
Right. Like masking it with something else.
Exactly. I mean, adding a little bit is okay, but to the point where it's really sweet. Like I've tried it myself and I thought, I feel like I'm drinking fruit roll-ups.
Right. It's that sweet.
It's sweet. So it's just more so when you're starting them, like trying different flavors, you don't want them to get used to so much sugar or sweetness.
Was there someone doing this, meaning creating a product like this, that you saw in the market, whether it be locally or abroad, like globally, that you thought, man, that's just like super innovative and I want to replicate that, as far as like a mentor, as far as a business? Or is this something you saw as a complete gap in the market and you wanted to populate it because no one else is doing it?
When I started, I had the idea. I thought that there's a gap, and there's definitely parents that are wanting like a fresh like option that's goes straight to their doorsteps. And then I started researching more, and I found that there are other companies in Canada and also in the States, but more so in the States because they have a larger population and babies. Yeah. We have an inverted pyramid where there's like very little like younger population, and older population there's just a lot more.
That's nationwide?
That's across Canada.
Wow.
Yeah, but I think now there's the younger population is growing now. Yeah. So hopefully, but I mean, the States is still a larger number compared to Canada. But yeah, that really kind of gave me a better idea that it is a feasible business. It could be a feasible business. It's more so just getting started and like seeing how it would grow in the Vancouver and market, like Tri-Cities. Yeah.
How long have you been doing this now?
I launched in June. We're really new. That's
awesome. So you're still in diapers.
Yeah, exactly.
You're probably just starting to like crawl and stuff.
Yeah, and
which is cool.
We're learning about our customers,
parents. Amazing. I really, as a father now, I really like to look at other businesses as like, where are they at? And like, are they a toddler yet? Are they walking but tripping? Yeah. I think there's a lot of beauty in that to describe kind of where you're at as a business.
We're wearing a diaper.
You're still wearing a diaper, which is great. So it's still relatively new, but obviously you've done a lot. You've learned a lot from day one to now. I'm intrigued to know what the Carla of today would tell the Carla of day one. Like, what have been some of the major pieces that you've learned? I think this is just valuable for you to reflect on, but also our listeners to better understand if they're looking to do something similar to this, whether it be a restaurant or a frozen good product or whatever it is, just like the lessons that you've learned. What are some of the key, really palpable things from day one till now that you feel you would share with the Carla back then?
Yeah, I think finding mentors and like peers that can support you has been huge. I have no background in business. Like my whole background's been in the food industry or like healthcare, right? And so finding a mentor that has been in the food industry in terms of business has been very helpful, and having that support as well, because it's definitely lonely here sometimes.
Yeah, it's very lonely. Just that whole entrepreneurial thing is very lonely at times. So
yeah, that was one of my main takeaway. And I'd also tell myself that it's, it could be lonely and that you're starting on your own, but I think it's just important to just get going and just
move, do something,
exactly,
create something.
Because what ended up happening to me is, I guess I got to know myself too. I learned that I'm a very research oriented. I like to do like a full on like looking into what other like businesses are doing, like what's working, what's not working. But at the end of the day, you have to really just test it out. You won't know until you have like parents or customers talking to you and like are willing to purchase like a box or like a Born Bright like meal from you to like validate whether you're in the right direction or not.
That is so valuable, like just jumping in.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You have to just move. But I get, I mean, I still feel, I don't know if this resonates with you at all, but excuse me, like the imposter syndrome. so much of like, why would someone trust me with their business, or why would someone want me to be that guy?
Just like me right now. I was like, why would Brad want to talk to me about baby food?
I just think there's, I mean, this podcast for me is and has always been a platform for anyone that's in this space. Like the umbrella of food is so vast and wide. Yes. So designers, architects, farmers, and the fact that your product is and can be one of the first items that maybe a child remembers or creates a memory with, whether it be the flavor profile subconsciously too. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you're the one who's willing to change what baby food is for the new and upcoming population, I think that's so cool and such a gift. And I just wanted to understand better like why you were doing this.
Yeah. And yeah, thank you for that, because it's such a niche product.
So niche, yeah.
It's such a niche product, and like it's sometimes hard to explain to random people when they hear fresh baby food. Like they never would have thought there would be a business in that.
Let's talk about that then. Like talk about like for people that are listening, they're like, oh, this intrigues me. I have a 2-month-old who we're hopefully soon going to be introducing to foods outside of just breast milk or milk.
Yeah.
What is the process like? How do people order? How do people consume? What does that take us from like ordering to, like you said, on their doorstep? Yeah. What does it look like?
So they would just go online, select whichever meals they'd like with a minimum of 16 meals for a box, and they could just enter that in, and we deliver and ship all over BC.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Amazing. And that literally is like a 2-day, 3-day, like for me to order tonight, when would I get it?
So it depends. If you're locally, we would be delivering by the weekend. Okay. And then if you're within BC, it would be delivered during the weekday.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
How has that been for you? Just like the learning about logistics and shipping. Yeah.
It's definitely a big,
a steep learning curve.
Yeah, it's a steep learning curve.
Yeah,
just because I have to look into logistics and purchasing packaging, and that is very costly, and having to learn about costing and supplies, and it's a huge learning curve for sure, but I'm so happy figuring it all out and having that experience just because
I think that stuff is so valuable in a new business. And I had the conversation literally just earlier today with an entrepreneur, and he had just done a photo shoot this weekend. He has a product that he sells, and he did it all himself, him and his partner. And he said, I really wanted to hire someone to do it, and would have been a lot better and quicker, but I want to understand the process first.
Yes.
Of how everything kind of operates in my business, so that when I do hire someone, one, I can really appreciate what they do, but also I'll have an understanding viscerally of how things are done. So I'm hoping that one day Born Bright Foods has a logistical side of your business that someone else is just running it for you. And you're just kind of overseeing it to make sure things are kind of running as they should.
It's definitely in the works. I think your friend is right, in terms of just getting systems in place and having your foot in there and having that understanding is definitely an advantage.
It's just more knowledge, and especially like I said, in a small business, in a small new business, it's the more you know, I think the better. Like cross training is something that comes up for me a lot in consulting. Getting everyone in your business able to do a bit of everything is so valuable.
Yes.
And then especially if this is your quote unquote baby, you knowing how to do a little bit of everything or everything with everything, it's just incredibly valuable. What have been the biggest challenges to date? Is it things like sourcing ingredients? Is it things like creating recipes? Is it keeping things fresh? What has been the biggest challenge for Born Bright Foods from its inception till now?
I think just getting the name out there, that we're still in the works of being part of the local community and the whole big social media.
Right, that's right.
And it's the marketing and the social media, that's all new to me. I had no clue before starting how big it is.
How powerful it can be, yeah.
Yeah, and so that was a big learning as well. And I think the next steps for us is to really just gaining that momentum and being able to gain more traction with our name and what we do and our purpose, and connecting with families with what Born Bright Foods is all about.
So is your vision to go coast to coast to coast with this?
I'd like it to be the first Canadian brand that focuses or offers fresh like alternative to baby food.
What are the challenges with the actual product itself? I mean, fresh keeps coming up when you're talking about it. So obviously it's different in that it is fresh. So what are some of the challenges that you face? So are we like batch preparing things, freezing it and shipping it?
Yeah.
And then what is the shelf life? Can it be frozen again, or what does that look like?
Yeah. So the current shelf life is roughly 3 months in the freezer.
Okay.
But if parents decide to just thaw it out, scoop a little bit, let their child try it, they could refreeze it back again.
Oh, okay.
So that's the idea in terms of the process
From
for Born Bright Foods.
From a scientific standpoint, what happens to our food when we do that? When we heat it, cool it, freeze it, de-thaw it, what's actually happening to the food?
So when you actually freeze like food that's fresh, it actually like retains its nutrients.
Oh, wow.
And so like, let's say a piece of fruit that's on the counter for a couple of days, which I think happens to everyone.
Yeah, definitely.
It actually degrades. Day by day, right?
So it's losing like its nutrient characteristics?
It's losing certain vitamins and nutrients in there. But if you were to freeze it, it actually retains it more. So like, let's say blueberries that are fresh versus frozen blueberries. The frozen blueberries are actually great options for the winter if you're wanting to use that as like as food. So nutritionally, freezer or frozen foods is actually, I would say, comparable to fresh.
Oh, wow. As far as a nutritional breakdown.
Yeah. But once you start cooking it or processing it, and when it comes to like pouches, like they're heavily heat treated, you lose quite a bit of nutrients. And so,
is there a number? Like, what would be the number? Like 30%? What's your guesstimate?
I have no percentages to say, but they do lose a significant amount.
Right. Where
if you were to just, cook it as if you were just cooking on a stovetop. Yeah.
Right. So not quite as aggressive with the heat.
Yeah, exactly. So with just the pouches or the glass jars, it's just not as nutritious, and you can kind of taste it, and also the flavor, and then the color is also different as well.
Let's talk about flavors. Let's talk about recipes. Are there recipes that you've had really good feedback on, and you're like, okay, we need to make more of these, or are there recipes that you've had feedback like, okay, we need to abandon this flavor profile?
Yeah.
What have been some of the winners and some of the swings and misses? Yeah.
So the root veggie, that one was, or root vegetables with like parsnip, carrot, sweet potatoes, and like a little bit of quinoa and a hint of cumin.
Oh, nice.
That one was very popular.
Yeah.
Parents are so surprised by like how it's almost like a holiday flavor. You get that nice like homey taste of like the cumin as a spice, and they never would have thought you could put spice or cumin in like baby food. Right. But it's a nice like combination. Parents like it. Babies love it, surprisingly.
Yeah, well, I think all those vegetables as well are relatively sweet. Right, like they have a sweet profile to them, and then adding the cumin just adds a different level to it. Yeah, it's interesting. We don't like give babies the benefit of the doubt that they can't appreciate like like textures or levels to their flavoring. And
I've met babies in hospital that were eating like like they're really like full of spice, like lentils and like tapenade or kimchi, like had
like big flavor bombs.
Exactly. And like I think it really boils down to like culture. What are you eating as a family?
For sure.
And having your child try it.
And like you said at the kind of the start of the podcast, is we're kind of spoiled here a bit in Vancouver, where it is so diverse with the different cultures that are here, where it's really accessible for families to go and try something, whether it's Vietnamese or Indian or Korean. Like, we're so blessed, and I encourage anyone. Obviously, this podcast goes further than the Vancouver borders, but if you are local here in Vancouver and you haven't go try something different, the flavor profiles that are different, or maybe try some Born Bright foods that have different flavor profiles. Yeah. Have there been any, I don't want to call them failures because they're not failures, just lessons, but has there been a recipe where it's just like, wow, that didn't go
work out. Yeah, we've had, I think I created so Green Goodness is the one with the broccoli and the kale. I originally had, I was trying out like different, I wanted fats in it as well, because you don't get that in like other baby food. So I added in olive oil, and that didn't really work out in terms of flavor profile. It had a bitter note to it. Oh, okay. It could be the type of olive oil that I was using as well, and so that didn't go too well with one of the
But it's a lesson. It's a lesson you've learned. Yeah. How often are you doing things like R&D just when it comes to recipes? Like, is that something you're doing weekly? Do you set aside time?
I try to do it monthly.
roughly?
Yes. Yeah. Just because I wanted to introduce more of like what the local like ingredients are that's available.
How big is, and I'm not a massive proponent of this because there's so much of a gray area with it now, but things like organic, how big is organic? Are families asking for it?
Mm-hmm.
Is it as important as, say, local produce? Like, where do you sit? Where does Born Bright Foods sit on the organic style or the organic side of food?
Yeah, so majority of our ingredients are organic, except for obviously vegetables or fruits that are not available in BC.
Correct.
So we try our best to source it as much locally and organic as possible. We do have parents requesting for organic, so organic ingredients for babies are especially in the minds of parents. That's their number one priority.
Yeah.
And research has shown that there is really not much of a difference except for most likely the use of like chemicals and like pesticides for using organic, but definitely especially in the first year of life where your child has more of an immune compromised state, then that's definitely a route that a lot of parents want to go.
Do you find in your professional work as a dietitian, or do you ever find yourself like passing off your business card to families like subtly? Like, does it come up in conversation? Because obviously you're advising families, I'm assuming you're advising families on like what they should be eating and or feeding their children and how and when. So does it ever come up like in conversation of like, just side note, like this is kind of something that I also do, no pressure, but this would be a good option to tick these boxes? I actually
haven't, just because the families that I work with are either, you know, not usually having like food or, you know, they have other means of nutrition. Okay. But it's also like part of my profession where I can't really just offer that. Yeah,
you can't be like opening up your robe and be like, hey, here's some more bright food.
But I have been like you know, discussing it with like colleagues and like other like healthcare members as well, that this option is available.
How much of Born Bright Foods for you since its inception has been an education, meaning you educating the public on things like there should be fats, carbs, and proteins in your children's purees if you're going to go down the puree route? So how much of what you do outside of just that, the very basic stuff, has been like an educational piece where you're not only marketing and advertising, but you're also educating as well?
Yeah, I think from the start, I like every time I introduce like Born Bright Foods, there's that component of like why I'm doing like Born Bright Foods, where I think there should be importance in nutrition, and that's kind of where it opens up in terms of the educating part. And I've been doing that through like nutrition talks, or even when I meet parents or new parents that just wanted to try, and it's more so just, you know, information that hey, it does matter what you give in the first like year of life matters.
For sure. Is there this is kind of going off the map a bit, but it's something that's very near and dear to me, and I don't know if we discussed it on the phone when we chatted or via email, but one of the reasons I do what I do, one of the reasons why I have this podcast and why I do consulting and why I do charity events, is my ultimate goal is to make millions of dollars, but not make millions of dollars so I can buy nice vehicles. I do want that as well, but I want to make millions of dollars so I can facilitate putting healthy food into everyone's mouth globally. That's one of my goals I have, like before I die. That's what I want to do. And as we're discussing this, I just feel like there's probably segments of our global population that could really use a product just like Born Bright Foods. Yes. So do you know of anywhere in the world right now that could like really, really use this product? I know right now we're talking about it's going to be a Canadian brand, but one day, who knows, it could live beyond those borders. Is there a segment of our global population right now that you feel is lacking what Born Bright Foods is offering and could be like an absolute game changer for those children?
In the world, or
globally?
I probably like third world like countries where there's that lack of nutrition for sure, but
like accessibility to it. Like something like, I don't know why like Kenya pops into mind. I don't know if that would be on the radar.
Yeah, absolutely. Any places that don't have much like focus on nutrition because of like, you know, low income or like poverty would benefit from it, and I definitely see like they could take a product like this. Yeah. The only thing would be like the ingredients, and I think there's like the offerings that I have is definitely more Western, but multicultural as
Right.
well.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Whereas like anytime you create a product, you always want to make sure that it is kind of embraced and it fits in well, right? So
With that demographic. I just pictured like a massive airplane full of like a refrigerated airplane where we're just dropping pallets of this stuff off to these people. Wouldn't that be so cool?
I think so. Yes. If I can definitely like ship like a bunch of like nutritious like meals to like a population that needs it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Let's keep in touch about that. Because who knows, when I make those millions, maybe we'll rent that plane and I'll buy a bunch off you and we'll deliver it together. Yeah. I just think there's far too much. There actually is a lot of low hanging fruit. Pardon the pun with the fruit, but there's a lot of low hanging fruit with change we can affect with food, both locally and globally. It just takes more conversation, and you know what? That's kind of again the beauty for me of this podcast is you never know. I say you, me. I never know which angle this podcast is going to go or where our friendship and relationship will go after this. But I like to think there's some synergies and like I can help you and you can help me. And maybe that's what does happen a few years down the road when I do reach my goals and I do start sending food and making trips all over the world. And
anything's possible.
Anything is possible. So ultimate vision, 5 years from now, where is Born Bright Foods?
I imagine Born Bright Foods to be available in like your local grocers. Parents to be able to just walk in. There's a freezer or refrigerator designated for fresh like food for kids or babies, because I don't think we have that option.
There isn't available right now, is there?
No, they're all directly from like smaller businesses.
Right.
I feel like more access to them through local grocers would be amazing.
Yeah, definitely. Well, so if any local grocers are listening, get in touch with Carla ASAP to help her reach her goals. Carla, this show is called the Half a Dozen Hospitality Podcast, as you know. And on the podcast, I ask my guests 2 questions. Every guest the same question. I'm going to put you on the spot here. You'll do well. I know you will. The first question is the half a dozen have-tos. So I need from you 1 to 6, so a half a dozen, of things you've experienced in your life that you feel like our listeners have to experience. Doesn't have to be food related at all. It can be a book you've read or a song you've listened to or a piece of art you've looked at or a trip you've taken. What would be 1 to 6 of your have-tos?
So 6 things.
Yeah, you can do 1 item or you can do all the way to 6. So it's up to you.
That's you really put me on the spot here. I'd say the first thing would be, just based from my own experience, is to travel Asia.
Okay.
I think a lot of people have been traveling Asia now, but I think really travel to like Vietnam or more of like the smaller countries and really get to know culture.
Yeah, very important.
Yeah.
With any other spots in Asia you think need to be highlighted?
I thought Vietnam was amazing.
What about it?
I just never knew anything about it except for how good the food was.
Right, yeah.
But being there, the food was definitely a lot more like just different in different regions. And things are so cheap too. And the people treat you so well, right? And so you get that really nice like vibe just going. The
hospitality vibe, if you will.
Yeah.
Any other things you feel like you've done that people have to do? A book you've read, another trip you've taken, a meal you've eaten.
A meal I've eaten.
And you're like, man, I wish everyone could try this. Was there a meal in Vietnam where you were like, wow, this is unreal?
Yes, there was a meal, I think, north of Vietnam. I can't recall, but it's a local food, but I don't even remember the name, but I think I'm going to butcher the name.
No, that's all right.
So I'm not even going to try, but it was very memorable. It was a simple dish with like fried, like it was almost like a wonton noodle, and it was like a dry noodle dish, but it was spicy. It was delicious.
I'm salivating just listening to you say that. Any other things that you've experienced in your life that you feel like listeners have to experience? You can tap out with 2. Those are 2 pretty good ones. Travel's very, very popular with people.
Yeah.
Travel always comes up. Any others? I think everyone that has a baby should try Born Bright Foods.
That too.
Shameless,
Give Born
shameless
Bright Foods
plug.
a try.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
The last one I have for you, Carla, is the half a dozen haven't yet. So again, 1 to 6 items. You can do 1 item or you can do 6 of things you've yet to experience in your life. We talked about growing your brand to a national brand where it's in freezers and fridges for families to be able to access. Is there anything else that is on your list that you haven't done yet that you want to do?
In terms of Born Bright Foods.
No, anything, just your life in general. We can talk about personal, professional, entrepreneurial, any of those things.
I always love giving like talks, whether that be
Okay.
like nutrition related or life related. So I think like one of my goals in life is just to be either in a large like conference and be able to just talk about something that I feel very strong about.
Right.
That's one of like my goals. My other one is to finally finish a full marathon.
Oh, okay.
I've been in the training for that.
Oh, good for you. Amazing.
So that's my other kind of.
When are we going to do that by?
Sometime next year.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Do we have a marathon like scoped out?
Yes, but it's a draw.
Oh,
for that
okay.
marathon,
Which one
so
is it?
It's the Berlin one.
Oh, Berlin. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Very cool. And when will we find out?
I find out end of November if I do
Oh,
get
so
in the
like
draw
a
or
couple
not.
weeks.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, this podcast will be up in I think 2 weeks. So it'll be before the results, but come back to this podcast and I'll put in the show notes at the time when it's released, whether or not you got in to Berlin or not. That sounds really cool. So are you an avid runner as it is?
Yeah. So I think I've been running for almost like 10 years now.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But yeah, so
So you've done half marathons?
I've done half marathons, but haven't done like a full marathon.
And shameless plug again, would good fuel for runners, whether they're doing, I have a friend that does ultra marathons.
Nice.
And obviously nutrition on those things is super important.
Mm-hmm.
Would something like a pureed, well-rounded food like a Born Bright Foods be something that you would recommend to runners?
Yeah. I would say anything that has like carbohydrates and a little bit of protein is always good in terms of endurance.
What are you consuming when you're doing longer runs?
Yeah. So before I do a long run, I would have like a regular like toast with peanut butter.
Okay.
Just because that's what I tolerate.
Right.
Some runners can't eat anything before a long run.
Right. I hear you. Yeah.
So it really is about trial and error, what you can have or not have during or before.
What are your thoughts on, this is going totally off tangent, but I'm okay with it. It's our show. Fats before exercise. Because I've heard varying thoughts, and obviously everyone's different in regards to their body. So we have to keep that in mind. But you mentioned peanut butter before a run. So you tolerate it, obviously. But generally speaking, should people avoid fats before exercising, or what's the rule there from the science?
A little bit of fat is okay, and it really depends on what you're doing. So if you're doing like long endurance, I definitely would cut back a bit on like the fat and the protein, and more so on the carbohydrates. But if you're doing like CrossFit, where your stomach is not jiggling, right?
yeah.
So you can definitely have like a little bit of like fat or like and protein like, for workout. But if you're looking for a large burst of energy, like let's say weights or like CrossFit, you definitely want like energy from carbohydrates as well.
Smart. What were your thoughts on I'm going to butcher his name, Kipchoge? Yeah. What were your thoughts on that?
I think that it's crazy like what the human body can do. And we've gone a long way, like from like
the 4-minute mile to
in a couple of years time, us being able to break the 2-hour mark. I think it's just a matter of time. It's definitely doable, but it's still crazy to think about what our bodies can do if you really push it to the limits. He's definitely a big inspiration of having to break the world record for that.
Amazing. How important do you feel something like, I'm assuming he had a team of dietitians, if not one, probably more.
Yeah.
How important would something like his nutrition be on like leading up to that day?
Oh, it's probably it's so vital, getting your nutrition down, even during like training season. And it probably does make a difference in addition to training, because every time that your body is being put into that like amount of work and like, it's a lot of like stress on your body. And so nutrition does play a big important, like it's a big role in terms of recovery and just replenishing and like healing your body after being thrown running for that long, even for ultra marathons, right?
Yeah, it's amazing what your body goes through.
Yeah.
But I think that's also it's something we have to consider as well with babies, because what their bodies are going through as they grow is just, I can't imagine like if we were to watch the bones growing and getting denser and the muscles stretching and all those things. So again, not to shamelessly plug what you're doing, but then like how important a product like Born Bright Foods could be for a child in that first year of their life or beyond.
It's so important
to make sure they're getting that well-rounded nutrition.
Yeah, their weight doubles by 6 months. So you can just imagine how fast they're growing, like how what you're feeding them is really fueling their body.
Yeah, their ability to or inability to, right?
Yeah,
amazing.
Exactly.
Before I officially let you go, if people do want to reach out, they want to learn more about Born Bright Food, they want to learn more about you and what you're doing, how best they do that?
Yeah, they can send me an email at hello@bornbrightfoods.com, or check out our website at bornbrightfoods.com, or reach out to me by social media.
Cool. And it's just Born Bright Foods on social as well, right?
Yeah, Born Bright Foods.
And then the website, you can also place orders there as well. Yeah,
right on the website. It's very like easy. You just select meals or select a subscription plan, whichever, and then we ship fresh baby food to your doorstep to feed your hungry little one. Amazing. I love it. I want to thank you so much, Carla, for coming on the show. You did an amazing job, by the way. You fielded every question so well. I would love to have you on again and dive more into like the science of food. I think it's something we haven't spent enough time on this podcast kind of dissecting. I think there's so much we can learn from the food that we eat and why we eat the food that we eat. I want to thank you guys for tuning in as you do week after week. If it wasn't for you, this podcast would not exist. And I want to quickly just celebrate Carla one more time. It is and can be very lonely going down this entrepreneurial path. And I want to do whatever I can with this podcast to support you and Born Bright Foods. So please do reach out if we can help you at all as you go down this journey, because we might not be by your side, but we're with you. Thank you. And it can be lonely, and I know it all too well. So I'm here to support you. The listeners will support you as well, and keep doing what you're doing because it's making a difference. That's it for me, guys. That is Carla. I am Brad. This is the Half a Dozen Hospitality Podcast. Thank you guys again for tuning in. Have an amazing week, and we'll see you next time for a brand new episode. You did it. Awesome. Well done.